Hey, everybody. How are you? Good morning. Leadership in Changing Times. My name is Ian Hill. Leadership, becoming a community builder. Little confusion. We had a little confusion. There was a little confusion there. That's all right. The guys in the studio behind the glass are totally freaking out right now, but all is good because we're live from coast to coast on both sides of the North American border. Executive leaders, public works directors, becoming a community builder. That's what we're doing today. We're talking about you and the role that you play as an executive leader. You're a community builder. Not only do you build and maintain, design, build, and maintain the tangible infrastructure, but you're a community builder in the intangible sense as well. You personally help to build a thriving community. And the department that you oversee touches every citizen from cradle to grave. What are we doing today? Well, today we're going to have a coaching session. Now, this is your first one. So what does that mean? That means I'm here for an hour. What? Yeah, I'm here for an hour just to take your questions. Now, if we do this right, this should be a dialogue amongst executive leaders all across North America in departments large and small. We have some very, very, very big departments, and we have some departments that are relatively, small. What's another word for small? You don't want to say tiny. My department is tiny. You don't want to say that. So relatively small. So it is a unique mix of professionals. Now, it's not the national conference, but there are close to 30, maybe 30 departments represented and agencies represented. And some are quite large, and some are relatively small. So it's an opportunity every 3 weeks for the group to come together. I'm the facilitator. I'm answering the questions. Now, I have some things that I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the Leadership History Survey and some others. But really, the hour is meant for you. And it will only be a productive hour if people ask questions. So how can you ask questions? Well, our trusty Jeff, say hi, Jeff.
Hello, everyone.
Our trusty Jeff is off camera. He's scanning the chat box for questions. He has the handy dandy phone to take any text. And then, of course, you can email your question in via questions@thechangingpoint.com. So any of those ways, those three conduits, you can ask questions. Now, is it face-to-face? No, it's not face-to-face. But frankly, we're from Alexandria, Virginia to Santa Ana, California. We're from Langley, BC to the Peel region of Ontario and all points in between. So it would be difficult to do face-to-face. But through the wonders of technology, I'm here for an hour. Now, you could ask me a question about your organizational structure. You could ask me a question about dealing with direct reports. You could ask me a question about creating organizational planning. You could ask me a question about how to deal with elected officials, community members, public meeting. You could ask me a question about anything you want. I'm going to want to talk about the Leadership History Survey and some of the material that we've covered in the last 2 weeks. And I also want to talk a little bit about what's coming in the future and how the rest of your department can maximize the benefit from the program. Because at this point now, everybody's gone through it if you're a department that has all levels of the organization going through. Okay, so Jeff's in the chat box. He's ready to answer questions. He's also monitoring the email, and he's also monitoring the text. If you ask a question, then he'll let me know, and then he'll ask a question and read it on air. If you don't want your name mentioned, then don't add your name. Or if you send an email and don't want your name mentioned, then say, please don't mention my name. Otherwise, if it's an email, he's going to mention your name. In the future, come prepared with some questions or send in an email with questions prior. This should be an intelligent dialogue, not just me going on and on for an hour. Okay, that isn't productive. It's a coaching time, a time for you to talk to somebody about what's going on in your situation and to ask some questions. When we started this thing, we talked about igniting the fire, asking you to look introspectively within yourself so that we could look back to move forward. And I gave you an exercise. That exercise was this leadership history survey. And I said that I knew you were very busy and you had a lot going on. But that at minimum, I wanted you to take a couple questions a day and think about them. Here's the premise. We know that behavioral science tells us that 80% of your behavior is unconscious. And whether that 80% of behavior that you do every day was organically established over a period of time through the influences of your life experience, through the influences of your parents or coaches or teachers, through the influence of your first boss, through the influence of life circumstances of tragedy, victory, difficulty, whatever, whether it organically grew up and took hold, or you intentionally developed the way you do things, or a mixture of the two. I think it behooves us to take a look back of how we became the leaders that we are. The 12 questions in the Leadership History Survey were meant for reflection. They were meant to force you to look within yourself and ask yourself, how did I become what I am? Now, it's not a value judgment. Is that good or is that bad? This isn't one of those surveys that's like a mathematical equation. Well, does that mean I'm good? Well, I don't know. I don't know if you're good or bad. Because the question which I posed in our teaching, and I will continue to pose for 14 more weeks or 13 more weeks, is this. Are the leadership approaches that you're utilizing, your style, your ways, are they what the times require? Because that's all that matters. Are they what the times require? So looking back to figure out how I got to be the way that I am, if that thing, that emotion that came from that life circumstance that repeats itself continually, I have to ask myself, does that emotion serve me well? Or when I sit in the meeting and certain people just make the hair on the back of my neck go up for no apparent reason, could that be because of some things that have happened in my life? Is that serving me well? So again, this is not a mathematical equation by any way, shape, or form. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's more to get you to think and ask yourself two questions. Are the styles that I'm utilizing serving me well? And is the emotion, the emotion, the perspective, and the like, is that serving me well? Keith was a little late on that. Is that serving me well? Right? So that's the point of this. So I'm going to go through the survey now. And let's just talk about it. Let's talk about what they could mean. Okay, the first question was, where were you born? What type of neighborhood? Was it city, suburb, country, whatever? See, if you grew up in a rural setting, country setting, and the formality was relaxed, and people just dropped by, people just dropped in, you may be expecting the same from your staff. Well, if they want to talk to me, they'll just drop by. However, if you grew up in a more structured setting where people had homes and people lived next to each other and they pulled into their garage and the garage door went down and there wasn't a lot of interaction in between, and you know, if there was, it was because there was an event or an activity that was more formally organized, then maybe you would come with that mindset. Again, no right or wrong answer. Just what type of neighborhood? Casual, relaxed, more formal, something in between? How large was your family? Any brothers or sisters? Where do you line up? Are you in the middle? You the first child? You the baby of the bunch? Now, we're not going to go into a long Dr. Phil dissertation about pecking order and birth order. But most studies show there is certain propensities that a first child leans to, a middle child leans to, or a baby of the bunch leans to. No right or wrong, just is that serving you well? Were you always called upon to be the leader as the oldest child? Did that responsibility burden that you both embraced it but also regretted it sometimes? How about as that younger child? Did you have to fend for yourself? Did you have to kind of play with yourself because you had older siblings that they weren't close to you in age, so you had to make your own way in the family? And again, are those things serving you well today? That's an interesting one. What games did you enjoy as a child? Did you lead, follow, or do little of both? Did you like individual activities? My wife was a dancer. She danced all over the world. And I'm always intrigued that she was a dancer who danced all over the world, but she doesn't like dancing with people. Like, she doesn't like dancing with me. Like, let's dance, honey. You're a dancer. Come on, you dance all over the world. Woo! And she's like, I don't want to dance with you. And it has nothing to do with not wanting to dance with me. Well, maybe it does. But you know what? Because she's used to dancing solo. She loves to dance, but she doesn't want to dance with anyone else. Okay, so now jump forward with me just a few weeks ago. She's taken up running. She's going to be a runner now. And she never ran in her life, but she's running because we're going to do this thing called the Spartan race. Maybe you've heard of it. The Tough Mudder and Spartan race, these extreme races, obstacle course things. So she's starting to run. So we went out running together. And I could see that she was annoyed. Like, we're running together. Whoop-doo, family running together, fitness together. Woo! Saturday morning, here we go. She's annoyed. She's just kind of annoyed. And I asked her, I was like, are you annoyed that we're running together? Well, kind of. And then it struck me. You know why? Because she's used to dancing alone. So she wants to do these endeavors by herself. It's not that she's against me or doesn't want anything to do with me. Just her life experience has been that she does these intense endeavors by herself. She feels more comfortable with that, and so on and so forth. And I know that she's in the chat box right now, so hopefully I didn't say anything that will cause a conversation later tonight. How many of you know, how many husbands know what I'm talking about? Now you're starting to think to yourself, did I do anything or say anything that will cause a conversation tonight? Am I good? Okay, all right. So anyways, you know, my point is, how about you? Now, this will get me in trouble, but really she shouldn't be annoyed. She should embrace us working out together. Now, I know that when you get married, you buy as is, right? It's an as is purchase. So I am not going to complain about it. But if you think about it, but her life experience, she has no reasonable justification for not wanting to run with somebody else. So what about you? Share that autobiographical, transparent story just to say, are there some things from your background that cause you to make choices or decisions today that don't have any seemingly reasonable basis, but you still do them? Well, sometimes you can look to your athletic endeavors. Did you like playing games by yourself? Did you like the collegiality of playing team sports? So you like that feeling? Did you have a negative experience in some team opportunities? So team isn't something that you normally gravitate to. Now look, I'm just asking the questions. I don't have the answers. Only you do, because this is looking back to move forward. All right, list your best friends as you grew up, and what do you especially like about them? So make a list of hopefully you made a list of your best friends, and you identified characteristics that you really enjoyed about them. Now don't forget, you can ask a question. Jeff's in there, text or chat or whatever. I bet you, if you and I sat down over a drink, a beer, a soda, a glass of wine, a cup of water, whatever, if we sat down over that, and I started to ask you about your friends and the characteristics that you liked about them, I bet you seek that out today. And I bet you if you told me about the characteristics of young people that you didn't like so much, those characteristics, when you see them in other people in the workplace, all of a sudden you don't like them so much. Wouldn't that make sense, Jeff?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
The problem is that might not be serving you well. Just because that guy acts like the guy who gave you a hard time in high school doesn't mean you shouldn't give him a chance. You've cut him out. You've sliced him out of the equation just because some of his characteristics resemble an experience that you had in the past. That prejudgment, that 80% of your unconscious behavior, that part of your unconscious behavior can't possibly serve you well as a community builder, can't possibly serve you well as an executive leader. Name an adult you were close to as you grew up. What leadership qualities did they exhibit? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean it's positive. I know, I'm adopted, right? So my father was not my blood father. And I always thought to myself, that will mean I'll never act like him. Because although he was a decorated military hero, he wasn't the greatest dad in the world. a lot he wasn't the greatest dad in the world. And I said to myself, I'll never be like that. Because number one, I'm not his blood. And number two, I see the poor example that he shows me, and I'll never be like that. You know what? There's like weekly, I go to myself, how the hell did I become my dad? Well, in the same sense, who are those people that have significant influence on you? What leadership approaches did they articulate? And are those leadership approaches being utilized by you today? And are they one that times require? Did you have that autocratic leader of a parent? Did you have that rollover leader of a parent who led very little? Or did you have something in between? Did you have the leader that was quiet, didn't say much, led by example? Did you have the leader that was always giving the pep talks? I don't know what your life experience was, but how is it manifesting itself today by those people of influence in your life? How about a teacher? This question will give you insight into your learning style. Name a teacher who had a strong influence on you. What did this person do that influenced you? That second part of that question is key to helping me understand the best way to get to me. In other words, that modality that that teacher used, what did this person do that influenced you? A word, a kind gesture, a role modeling. I bet you those are the same things that make the biggest impact on you now. I bet you those are the same conduits of communication, of style, of approach that make an influence on you now. What was your first real job? And what leadership learnings did you obtain from that job? Did you have a job where you got thrown in and you were expected to figure it out, and then you figured it out successfully? And have you now projected that out and say, come on, figure it out? And so you justify not providing adequate training programs or assimilation programs or indoctrination programs because when your first job or your second job, you were able to bootstrap yourself? Now, it's not a value judgment. It's just say, does that approach serve you well? List all the jobs you had in your career. What do you see? Are there any trends there? Any trends about where you were highly successful? Any trends about where maybe you didn't succeed as well? When I took this test originally, it showed me that where I succeeded was in projects that had short-term focus. I succeeded where there was a very clear-cut goal. I succeeded where my role was clearly defined. I did not succeed when it was longer than 24 months to 36 months. I couldn't hold my focus. Maybe that's the ADD in me. And if there was multiple things that we were trying to achieve, I had a hard time. But if there was clearly defined outcomes with clearly defined timelines and that I could focus my energy exclusively on that, I probably did very, very well. Yeah, but you ran a very, very large organization, or at least helped to run it. Well, wasn't there multiple objectives? Well, within the overall objective of profitability, certainly there was a lot of action steps in short-term and near-term, mid-term goals that had to be achieved. But the goal, the winning, was quite clear. Make money. Just like all the other things that we've done. That's why I'm an outcome-based thinker, because I came to find that that was the environment where I did best. How about you? What's the environment that you do best? To be a successful leader today, I think it's important that we know where we're best and then try to create an environment or a context that helps us thrive. And we know where we aren't so hot. And so we avoid that environment. Now, that doesn't mean we can completely eliminate that, but we mitigate the times that I'm in an environment that I don't do well. That only makes sense. That's the enlightened leader, in my opinion. And then we try to teach our people to do the same. So, you could use the golfing term, try to get them in their sweet spot. If a person knows, if a person knows where their sweet spot is, they're more likely to succeed. If a person knows where they're out of alignment, then they can avoid that, they're more likely to succeed. It's setting yourself up for success. But that begins by looking at the jobs that you had and what they could mean, where you've succeeded, where you've maybe not done so well. All right, these next two questions are critical. Critical. Now, don't forget, you can ask a question in the chat box. You can ask a question via text. You can ask a question via email, and I would encourage you to do so. Look at this question. This is critical. Who was your best boss? In what ways was that person a good leader? This will define how you expect to be managed. Huh? Yeah. So whoever you say your best boss was, and then you list the qualities, attributes, and approaches that they utilized, that's the gold standard to you. And every other boss you have, your city manager or town manager, your commissioner, your whoever your deputy city manager, whoever it is you report to as an executive leader within Public Works. Whoever your best boss was, whoever came to mind and you wrote them down, and then you wrote down their qualities, attributes, and approaches that you really appreciated, that's the gold standard for you. And every time you get managed or led by somebody else, you'll compare it to that gold standard. Now, what's funny about that is that might not serve you well. Because you might bring forward some negative comment, well, I'm not being led properly. Well, no, you're comparing them to the ideal. Now, here's the funny thing about that. Flip that now. Flip that. And say to yourself, are you somebody's best boss? Here's something else I want you to do. And I'd like you to, if you actually take this challenge, and I'll remind you of it on Monday, whoever's name you wrote on the piece of paper or thought about in your mind, if you only thought about these questions, I want you to get a hold of them. If they're still on the planet, I want you to get a hold of them. That first boss that you had, that director you had, that coach that you had, the music teacher that you had, that leader that you had in your life, or that best boss that you had in your life, I want you to track them down. I want you to call them on the phone. Don't send them an email. At minimum, call them on the phone. At maximum, go see them. And you got 2 weeks to do it. Go track them down. Hey, I had to do this exercise for this leadership program I'm part of. It asked me who my best boss or leader was. And you know what? You came in my mind. It also asked me to list the things that you did for me or helped me with, or your attributes or qualities that were such an impact to me, and why you were a good leader. And it made me reflect about the difference that you made in my life. Think about making that phone call. Think about sitting and saying that in someone face to face. That phone call will go something like this. Ba-da-ding, ba-da-ding, hello, hello. Hey, hey, hey. Haven't heard from you in a long time. Well, you know, I'm going through this leadership program, and made me think of you. Made me realize that you're the best leader I ever had. You made a significant difference in my life. And so I'm calling today just to tell you that. To tell you that you made a difference in me, and I just want to thank you for it. There'll be silence on the other end of the line. You know that. And then you'll hear this. Are you drunk? Are you drunk? No. Hopefully what you'll hear is, thank you. Your best boss. Now, the reason I want you to do this exercise is twofold. One, I want you to give that gift to another human being. In today's narcissistic society, where we think that we build ourselves, it's always nice to take and humble ourselves a little bit and acknowledge the people that brought us where we're at today. So you stop and you reach out and you give a gift of gratitude and thanks. And you and I both know you might make their day. You and I both know you might make their week. You and I both know you might make their month, their year. You might even make their life. And you don't know what place they're in on the other side of that phone or on the other side of that table. They might need that on that day. You're a sorry excuse for a human being if you don't try to make that phone call. What? Well, you just agreed with me that we could probably change somebody's day, brighten their life. But here's the second reason that I want you to do it. It'll reinforce for you that you have the opportunity to be somebody else's best boss. You have the opportunity to be somebody else's world changer. You have the opportunity to be someone else's lifter, encourager, someone that could make a significant difference. You have that opportunity every day because you're the executive leader. All right, look at number 10. Who was your worst boss? Please do not call them. Do not call your worst boss, if you would, please. Don't call your worst boss. And don't call them and say all the ways they sucked. Please don't do that. But here's the interesting thing about this. If you tell me who your worst boss is, and if you tell me all the ways that they're a poor leader, here's what I know for a fact. That tells me the standard of what you will not tolerate. That also cautions me and should caution you that when someone else exhibits those qualities, where does your head immediately go? Your worst boss, the qualities they exhibit. When you see those in someone that's leading you, I guarantee you, you think less of them. Guaranteed. Unless, of course, you've identified that and said to yourself, I'm not going to make that mistake. Because the fact that somebody exhibits a characteristic of your worst boss doesn't make them worst. Doesn't make them bad. They may have a lot to teach you. They may have a lot to share with you. They may have a lot that you can glean from them. So don't discount them initially, that book by the cover mentality, because they have exhibited a quality that you had a bad experience with. I think that we do this a lot. Now, this survey I'll be reviewing with your direct reports next week. You want to get a great insight into what your direct reports expect and what they will not tolerate? Ask them the question to number 9 and the question to number 10. Don't ask them the names necessarily, because you might, in the case of number 10, get an answer you don't want. You might find out that your name was written down in number 10. I'm sure my name has been written down in number 10 a few times. But when you ask about the characteristics, what were the characteristics of number 9? If I ask another person that, I immediately know how they want to be managed. I immediately know what they think is the gold standard of being led. I didn't say it was the gold standard of being followed. I said it was the gold standard of being led. And number 10, if you ask them what were the things that, the ways that this person was such a poor leader, don't need the name. You're going to absolutely understand very clearly what they will not tolerate and what they define as poor leadership, just in those 2 questions. That's why it's so important for you as the executive leader to know what the others are doing in the program, so you can ask these kind of questions. We're creating an internal dialogue so that the learning occurs in between the times that you talk to me. The most successful departments that have used this program most successfully were the programs where the director was intimately involved in the dialogue, that they were learning, or at least giving the impressions of learning, so that everybody else thought they were learning. And they were regularly dialoguing and communicating with their staff, direct reports, and others about what the program meant. Hey, did you take that leadership history survey? What did it say to you? Here's what it said to me. So if the big boss is doing it, it sends a message down line that everybody needs to be doing it. All right, 2 more questions. And then, Jeff, let me know if we have any questions.
Yeah, we haven't had any.
Come on, guys. We're not going to sit here all day and listen to me ramble. The whole point of this is that you ask a question. It's a coaching session. So you ask a question, I give my opinion. You ask a question, I give my perspective. I provoke some thought. You make a smart-ass comment. I should shut you down. No, I don't do that. We don't do that. Identify mentors who have influenced you. What changes have you made as a result of their influence? Now, this also speaks to the attributes and qualities that help you be teachable and coachable. Like for me, good or bad, right or wrong, I have a hard time being mentored by people who haven't done at least what I've done. Now, the problem with that is I miss a lot of learning opportunities. Now, that isn't the way I used to be. The way I used to be was I'd learn from everybody. When I was in the casino business, I learned from the busboy, I learned from the valet attendant, learned from everybody. But somehow, as I've gotten older and gotten more arrogant and full of myself, I guess, I've started to think, well, that person can't teach me unless they've done what I've done. Well, that's ridiculous. Why are you telling us that? I'm holding myself accountable by telling all of you that that's something I got to grow in. Because every human being can teach me something, and I need to be open to that learning if I want to become a whole person. And I can't possibly be vocationally competent in everything. And so I have to respect the vocational competencies of others and allow them to speak into my life. So very quickly, when you look at these mentors, both formal and informal, you'll start to realize not only what they taught you and maybe be reminded of what they taught you, but also the style that you connect with best when looking for a mentor. We all need someone that can speak into our lives. None of us is going to be able to fly on this thing solo. What one significant piece of leadership advice would you give to others? Now, twofold thought here. One, it helps you realize what you hold dear. Your pillar, if you will, of leadership. This is my pillar of leadership. But then I always ask this question. How are you exhibiting it on a daily basis, and how are you instilling it in others? How are you exhibiting that key pillar, and how are you instilling it in others? Because if you're not exhibiting it, and you're not instilling it, is it really one of your core values? I'd probably question that. I'd probably say that it's not. Probably not one of your core values if you're not exhibiting it or instilling it. There's oftentimes, I know in my own leadership style, a gap between principle and practice. And our challenge as leaders is that we got to work really, really hard to push that thing together so that we have as little of a gap as possible. I know for myself there is a gap between principle and practice, and I got to shove that together. Well, one way to shove that together is to put in front of me what I think are the key aspects of leadership, and then be regularly asking myself, how am I exhibiting it? How am I instilling it? How am I exhibiting it? How am I instilling it? And you know what? Sometimes when I have that dialogue with myself, I come up short. Well, Ian, I'm going to get done with this survey and feel like a piece of crap. No. But any of you that have ever been athletes, and forgive the non-athletes, forgive me for using an athletic metaphor. Game film's a pretty funny thing. When they show you a videotape of how you played, there's no subjectivity. The camera is objective. What you just did is what you just did. And so it's a great learning tool. Well, these introspective exercises, if approached openly and enthusiastically, can be that great learning tool if we're willing to allow it to be. But ultimately, it's an exercise to help you look back, to figure out how you got here, and then say, are these things still serving me well? Is that fear that came out of my worst boss still serving me well? Is the trepidation of walking into certain relationships because of these places where I got burned in life, is that still serving me well? Or does it cost me to miss opportunity? Does my aversion to a certain style and a certain approach that comes from other human beings, because I was offended and I was in some way put off in my past, is that still serving me well? Do I still need to have that caution? Do I still need to have that trepidation? Conversely, those attributes and qualities that I used to embrace, are those the attributes and qualities that are necessary today? Now notice that I didn't say anywhere in there principles or values, but so much of today's interpersonal relationship is style. And we get put off by style. Well, I don't like your style, Ian. Okay, so you don't like my style? Do you have the capacity to raise above that and listen to the content? And we end up so oftentimes only spending time with our style. How can we possibly grow from that? How's that possible, Jeff? It's not possible. We can't possibly grow by just hanging out with our people, listening to our radio station, listening to our channel. And that's the only people we ever spend time with. Are you kidding me? How can I become a whole person? Find the person most diametrically opposed to your opinion and go build some kind of bridge with them. I think probably the mafia had it right. Be closer to your enemies than you are your friends. Where did I even get that?
Did you watch The Godfather again?
Black.
Did you watch The Godfather again?
I watched The Godfather last night. No, I didn't. No. I watched Casino. No, I didn't watch that. So my point is that, you know, think about it. How, what's the word I want? incestuous does this all become? I surround myself with people I'm comfortable with. I go to places that I'm only comfortable. I hang out with the people that think like I do, and I coalesce with everybody that has my exact perspective. Am I going to grow in that? I just can't see how you would. I'm looking at the fellows over here, and I can't see how you would. If I really want to grow, I got to pepper my life with some people that don't think like I do. I got to add some salt to my life of people that don't have the same opinion. I got to throw some carrots and some celery into that soup to make it a wonderful, robust meal. I'm hungry. Sorry for the food analogy. All right, that's the Leadership History Survey. That's the Leadership History Survey. Looking back to move forward. Igniting the fire, not by rah-rah, but igniting the fire by looking introspectively, a thoughtful consideration of your leadership approach, and then parsing, is that the word? Or separating the wheat from the chaff, or separating the things that are serving you well still and the things that might be passé and were for a time in your life gone by. What is that? Yeah, but you're not telling me how to lead others. I am telling you the first step in being effective in leading others is removing any barriers that might impede you from being effective in leading others. Your emotions, your background, your history that might impede you from your full potential and what you could be and what you could do. All right. Questions? Questions? Jeff.
We haven't had any questions by email or in the chat box yet, but I had a question.
All right, Jeff has a question.
I have a question.
See, Jeff, the producer director is on it. I love Jeff. Very good. Yes, sir.
Well, you talked a little bit about questions 9 and 10 and sharing some of that information maybe with some of the direct reports.
Right.
What would be kind of a setting, or how would that conversation feel?
That's a good idea. Good question. Excellent question, because oftentimes it sounds really good, Ian, but how do I actually go do that?
Right.
Okay. So let's first say it's going to depend on the relationship you have with the direct report. So the relationship you have with the direct report, if it's strong, long-term, long time, it's more of a peer-to-peer relationship, then it's this. Hey, what did you think of that number 9 and number 10? Did you take the leadership history survey? And what did you think about number 9 and number 10? Who or what were the attributes of your best and what were the attributes of your worst? And then share yours. Now, if you have a more formal relationship, very hierarchical, it's more formal, then I would just sit down over a cup of coffee and say, I'm trying to get to know more about you. I'm trying to get to know more about the best ways to lead you. That question number 9 and question number 10 should surely give me some insight in how I can be better for you. So that's really how I would approach it. I would approach it coming low and humble and say, this is an attempt for me to better understand your style, your approach, and what would help me be a better leader for you. Or you could say this, I'm trying to learn how to better manage you. Right?
Yeah.
So from my standpoint, that's the direction I'm going down if I'm sitting and talking with them. And then I would encourage them to do the same thing with their people. Because this is about alignment, everybody. It's about alignment. What do you mean alignment? You ever had your back out of alignment? You got to go to the chiropractor. Oh, my back. Well, alignment's a funny thing. There's organizational alignment, intangible organizational alignment, alignment of thought, alignment of energy, alignment of effort, alignment of passion, alignment of love, alignment of all the intangibles that make an organization great. Just like the flow of water, and then Jeff added this last session, the flow of electricity, there has to be, if there is any impediment to that, the strength of the flow is diminished. So when there's interpersonal challenges between me and my direct report, or a lack of understanding or miscommunication, the energy, the enthusiasm, the passion, and all that hits my direct report and dissipates. And then hits his direct report or her direct report and dissipates. And by the time it gets to the person furthest away from you in the organization, it is but a trickle. So it comes out of the executive office as a torrent, and it gets out to the person furthest away from you as a trickle. And the challenge with that is you are being judged on the person furthest away from you. You're not being judged on your own performance. You'll get fired. People will let you go based on the performance of the people furthest away from you. So it's important that those conduits between you and those people are clear of any impediment, are clear of any obstruction. And the way to clear up the obstruction or the impediment is to ask your people, how do you want to be managed? See, in the past, it would have been this: shut your mouth up and bend to my style. Today, it's, I ain't bending to your style. Because as we said in the teaching session, we're in a user-driven society. Now I've got to bend. Do you know how many years? I think she told me 12. On and off, my wife has worked for me for 12 years. And every couple years I fire her. Usually she quits before I can fire her. It's kind of like this: and she yells, I quit! So she's back working again and doing a phenomenal job. And she said something interesting to me the other day. I was like, I'm amazed by how much work you get done, Gina. And she said, Ian, for 13 years, I've been telling you, just tell me exactly what you want done, it'll get done. And for 12 and a half years, Ian, you've been saying to me, you should know what needs to get done. You're an executive leader, go do it. But for some reason, Ian, you've started telling me exactly what to do, and I get it done. It's only taken you 12 and a half years to change your style, she said. Now, why she didn't look at me and say, thank you so much for changing your style? How many of you know this will be the topic of conversation over the supper table tonight, right? I use that autobiographical example just to say, if I had bent my style early on, she wouldn't have been fired or quit 7 different times over the last 12 years. There would have been alignment if I would have bent my style. So, in your specific instance, Jeff rightfully asked the question for you. He's helping you. Rightfully asked the question, how do I go have that conversation, Ian? Great question. I'm making the point of why you would want to have that conversation. So he talked about how to do it, and I'm reminding you of why it's important. Gain alignment by better understanding. All right, any questions?
No.
Okay. So we got about 10 minutes to go. Now look, if there's no questions, then I'm shutting it down. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. I'm not sitting here just rattling on. Okay, if there's no questions. What can we look forward to? Okay, on Monday, you're going to get another exercise, continuing that introspection. Because next week, we have a teaching session, right? We start our next 3 weeks. So on Monday, you're going to get an exercise. It's a leadership style inventory. So we've looked back to move forward, but now let's look at the style you utilize today. So on Monday, you're going to be given a video and a handout. Now the video is about 19, 20 minutes. So if you have to look at it over 2 phases, that's fine. But basically, you're going to be taking a skills assessment, a leadership skills assessment, identifying your leadership style. Now, why are you going to be doing that? To understand where you're at today. So we've looked back to move forward, but now let's understand the style you're utilizing. The following Monday, your direct reports are going to get that exercise, as will your front line. The whole point is for the whole department or the whole work group or whatever it is to better understand each other's style in an attempt to gain alignment. Look, you know that there is chatter that goes on in your workplace every day. Rumors, talk, nonsense, athletic endeavor, football game, blah, 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 this and that, lies, cheats, blah, blah. You know there's chatter. Well, I think that chatter is an opportunity. Let's fill that chatter with, oh, hey man, what are you? I'm an organizer. What are you? Well, I'm a whatever the other ones were. Nurturer. I'm a nurturer. There's probably not too many nurturers, but I'm a nurturer. Well, that's pretty cool, dude, because I'm an energizer. What are you? I'm a researcher. I'm a monkey. I'm a muskrat. Whatever. There's never muskrats. But that emanates from you. So you do it, And then you say to your people, hey, I know you're going to be doing this exercise next Monday. I'll be looking forward to what you are. And then you'll learn about what I am. Now, all those goofy exercises only have one point, to give people better understanding. The premise here being, if I better understand you and you better understand me, we have a greater likelihood of alignment. Jeff is looking at me like he has a question.
I do. I have two questions,
Whoa!
actually. We have two questions.
Came in via text?
So I've got one from text and one from email. So I'm going to start with the text first because that came first.
Okay.
And the question is, how can you evoke change while bending to employees' preferred management style?
Okay, how do you evoke change by bending to somebody else's style? Well, it's interesting that you say that, because when we talk about being an agent of change starting next Friday and then talk about it for 3 weeks, here's the essence of my philosophy on evoking change: trust. If you don't create a trusting relationship and a trusting environment, the likelihood of people changing is minimal at best. Because they won't change, because they don't trust. If I trust that I'm okay, if I trust who's talking to me, if I trust, then I'll be willing to go to places I've never been, whether that's through my own approaches or a new policy and procedure. If I don't trust, I'm reluctant to go to places I've never been. It's basic, common human sense. Wouldn't you agree, guys? Just basic human sense. If you are telling me that I've got to go do a bunch of stuff I've never done before or I don't want to do, and I don't trust you, I am digging my friggin' heels in the ground, baby. Fact is, I'm sabotaging it. However, if I trust you and you say to me, this is important, we need to change it. I don't like it, you don't like it, but I believe this is the best course of action. When I trust somebody who's saying that to me, I do it. Okay, then how do I gain trust? Now again, we'll talk about it for 3 weeks, but I gain trust by bending. By bending. I didn't say bend my principles and values. I didn't say go around kissing everybody's ass and throwing away all policies and procedures. I didn't say that. I said bend your style so you can better understand another human being and build a bridge between you and them based on trust. Once you understand another human being because you've bent your style and you've gained that trust, they're more likely to walk down the road of change with you. Period. And in a user-driven society where every other institution in their life bends to them, then they come against you, the hard brick wall that won't bend. Again, not policies and procedures. But if their leadership style is one of nurturer and you're an energizer, you don't know what these terms mean, you'll know on Monday, you're probably going to disconnect. So just freaking change. Like I had to do with Gina. Come on, dude. Don't go through 12 years of heartache like I shouldn't have said that. It hasn't been 12 years of heartache, honey. Just 12 years of difficulty on your part because I wouldn't bend, honey. Okay? Don't need that conversation. All right, next.
Okay, the email. This is from Brian.
Brian. From where? Where's Brian from? Does it say?
Doesn't say.
In the second half of his email?
No.
Okay.
So, can you help us understand the difference between management and leadership?
Excellent question.
And
Peter F. Drucker, but go ahead.
We will be transitioning from a union contract to a non-union environment in July using an employee handbook. In other words, we'll be going from managing a contract to leading our employees.
Now, here's the funny thing. People are, and this is going to go over. This is a good question. Great question! Brian, from unknown parts unknown. Some mystery caller, typer, emailer. Where's he from? What's his email say?
Brian Amundsen
at
Eau Claire.
Oh, from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Come on, Wisconsin. Go Badgers. All right, great question, Brian. Now check this out. And for all the rest of you. There has been this talk over time disparaging managing people. Don't manage people, lead them. Let me clarify for you, from my perspective, of why both are critical. Leading people is about inspiring vision. It's about building collective energy. It's about tapping into the collective intelligence. Basically, it's about taking a bunch of different people from a bunch of different backgrounds with a bunch of different talents, experience, and interest, and moving them towards a common goal. That's leading. The big picture conceptual piece is leading. Managing is about policy, procedure, system, process. Here's the funny thing. You can't be a successful leader if you don't know how to manage. Do you know what the number one, and you can email me on this freaking thing right here, because you ain't never heard this. You know what the number one key to the Western civilization is today? The why we have the thriving, lowest poverty levels in the history of mankind, lowest hunger in the history of mankind. People are hungry, not in comparison by percentage to the history of mankind. You know what it is? Management. Do you know what the turn of the century, the largest employer in the British Empire was? 300 people. 300 people. A textile plant of 300 people. What are the largest employers today? Hundreds of thousands of people. How are we able to make that transition? How are we able to make that transition from only being able to employ a few skilled tradespeople at a time to massive skilled people, marshaling them towards a common goal? Leadership? No. Managing. How to manage all those people. Get them on the same page with policies and procedures and expectations. So I think you better have both. The difference between managing and leading is about marshaling the human capital of a bunch of different people from a bunch of different backgrounds with a bunch of different talents, experience, and interests. The management side of that is how. The policies, the procedures, the handbook that you're talking about. So you're going to move from managing a union contract to managing a handbook. The policies and procedures. The key is in either situation, were you ever leading? What do you mean? Were you preaching the why and the importance of the work that was being done? Were you tapping into the collective intelligence of all employees? Were you lifting up people to their best? And were you creating an environment where they were constantly being developed? That's leadership. Leadership is about vision. Leadership is about direction. Management is about the infrastructure that supports that. People that look at me and say, I'm not a manager, I'm a leader. I look back at them and say, well, then you're not doing anything. Because without the infrastructure of management, leadership will collapse. You'll just be a banging gong giving pep talks every day. The sizzle must be combined with substance. So in your specific instance, Brian, you will still be managing the handbook. Because the handbook has the ways that we do things, the policies, the procedures. Now, I want to clarify what I said a moment ago, because I really want you to think about this. Without the effective growth, sophistication, and establishment of management as a profession, we would not have the economies we have today. We were able to get to where we are today, skilled people of different backgrounds and interests, moving towards a common goal because we became more sophisticated in policy, procedure, and system. Now, I understand why the pendulum swung back to the whole dialogue of leadership, because that management isn't glitzy. It's not fun. It's not fun to sit and write the procedures. It's not fun to build the systems. So we all want to be leaders. But both are necessary. And the true leader can put their foot in both camps. They can lead, and then they can create the policies, procedures, and systems, or be a catalyst for such, for the management of all that human capital to work. In the past, how did we manage? With a whip. When they built the pyramids, it was through fear of death. Today, how do we do achievements the likes of which never were ever thought of in the history of mankind? Because we've become more sophisticated at managing and understanding how that complements leading. That was really good. That was really good. That was really good. Any other questions? Say, Ian, you're very impressed with yourself. No, Because you know what? I'll tell you why. Because I've struggled with that for years. I've struggled with understanding this whole thing. I even was a person that said, I don't manage, don't manage people. You manage processes and systems, you lead people. But that's so naive. That's so short-sighted. And it wasn't until I really dove into the writings of Drucker, probably the most brilliant business guru of our time of the 20th century. He was clear that you needed both. And that great leaders were able to function in both. Vision, direction, marshaling human capital, systems and processes and procedures that supported that. Without those systems, processes, and procedures, your handbook, you wouldn't be able to marshal the human capital because there would be no clarity of how we do things, there'd be no clarity of direction, and there'd be no clarity of reward and consequence. That fundamental shift that occurred at the end of the 2 centuries ago and the beginning of the last, that shift that then evolved in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s is why we have the economies we have today. And as many people are as hungry, and I know it's tragic how many people are hungry, right? It's tragic. But there's fewer hungry people today than ever before, Jeff, by percentage. By percentage. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be out there trying to help people. I'm not saying that. All right, any other questions, Jeff?
One more another
Last
question. We've got several questions.
What?
Actually. Yeah, we're getting.
Why the hell do you ask them with 3 minutes to go? What's wrong with you people? Why would you ask questions at 9:25 or 11:25, depending on where you are?
A question: how can trust be built within a department with when there has been a culture of distrust between employees and management?
Exactly. Exactly. Stay tuned to next Friday because we're going to talk about that. Because the reality is, in many of your departments, there's a lack of trust. We froze wages. We laid people off. Not we, but circumstances caused us to freeze wages. We've laid people off, and now somebody's coming in with a rah, rah, rah. Well, we don't trust that. Or how about this? Oh, flavor of the month. We've heard this crap before. Some executive leader went to some seminar or workshop. Now he's coming back to try to do new things. You know what the #1 key is? Be honest. Stand up in front of your people and say this: I know that you don't trust. And looking back, I don't necessarily agree, but I can understand why you might not trust things around here. And then list all the reasons why they might not trust things around here. And then say this: you know what? All I'm asking you to do is trust me for the next 5 minutes. And if I do what I say I'm going to do for the next 5 minutes, then give me an hour. And if I do what I say I'm supposed to do for an hour, then give me a day. And if I do what I'm supposed to do, I say I'm going to do for a day, then give me 2 days. So you have to be honest. So to your question very specifically, how do I establish trust when it's been fractured in the past? Be honest about the fracturing. And then tell them what you're going to do different. And you might even have to apologize. Well, what if it wasn't me? Just apologize for the fact that there's a toxic environment and trust isn't abound. But we'll talk more about that in the 3 weeks of Agent of Change, because an agent of change understands how to demonstrate and exert influence by building trusting relationships to act as a catalyst for change. So your question will be answered for 3 weeks starting next Friday. Go.
You may also answer this one in the future too. One of my direct reports in our very small city team is a naysayer, critic. Discussions of style, etc. will be open season for an individual like this to take cheap shots at me and the team. How do you handle an individual like this? It seems questionable to engage in an individual like this.
Okay, so you got a naysayer who has questions about your style and approach. So, okay, one obvious answer would be, don't go ask him who his best boss or worst boss was. I mean, that would be obvious. But if you wanted to engage him, and now listen to me on this. With guys like that or gals like that, I'm not going to try to ever get them on board. What? No, I'm just going to try to move them one notch. What's the one notch? I just want them to shut up. So you've got people that I would classify as green. They're on board. They're along with the program. You got people that are classified as yellow. They're just kind of in between. And then you got resistors. Now, we're going to talk in the next coaching session. We will talk very specifically about the early adapters, the early risers, the crowd, and the resistor, and what that all means when impacting change and affecting change, those different personalities. But let's just talk about the resistor. I don't need the resistor to get on board with what we're doing. I just need the resistor to not openly oppose what we're doing. So if it was me, I'd be sitting down and having a chat with that person, and we're going to talk about this in the next 3 weeks, a chat that's open-ended discovery approach where I'm asking open-ended questions. I'm doing 80% of the listening, 20% of the talking, and I'm just trying to figure out why this guy's so negative. That's all I'm trying to figure out. Did he get offended somewhere down the road? Did we piss him off somehow? Did he supposed to get a raise and he didn't? He's supposed to get promoted? You know, who knows? Going through a divorce, kids in rehab. Why is this guy so bitter? Once I understand why this guy's so bitter, then I can take steps. He's never going to be on board. Okay, well then you better, you know, and the challenge is sometimes that guy's a good performer, but he's just a pain in the ass. He's just a malcontent. He's a curmudgeon, right? Well, you've got to determine then, you've got to make a tactical decision of, is his curmudgeonness impacting others? Because as soon as his curmudgeonness begins to impact the team, then I have to step in. Now, we will talk about that in the 3-week period. But the first step is trying to figure out why. Why is this guy such a naysayer? Have we done something? We will absolutely talk about this, as we will with your direct reports in the Agent of Change time. We'll talk about how to coach and how to coach poor performance and poor performers in very, very specific terms. So I don't mean to push off the question, but we will be addressing that, as Jeff said, because Jeff knows what he's talking about. All right, Jeff, anything else?
No, we're good.
All right, we're good. All right, everybody, so we're coming to the end of our time together. I just got a few final comments as we wrap up. We've got about a minute to go. For this program to be effective, you have to do what you did in the last 10 minutes there. You asked questions, and they were good questions. Now, typically, I'm not going to push them off like I did, but literally, we're going to talk about it next Friday. And because you asked the question with 2 minutes to go, I didn't have more time. So, what I would ask you to thoughtfully do is be prepared to come to this discussion with questions. That's why when we send you the reminder, it says, send in your questions prior. Ideally, I will have no material to talk about during this hour. Ideally, you're just asking questions. And then I'm doing what I did there, giving operational insight. Now, you might not always agree with my answer, but it's meant to provoke some thought. Monday morning, you're going to get an email. That email is going to give you this leadership style inventory, give you a sense of the leader you are today. We just looked back, now where are you at today? The following Monday, your direct reports will get that. There's an opportunity for dialogue. This is an opportunity for dialogue. If you want to get the whole department on board, start talking about the program, sharing your insight, your take. I thought he was full of crap. I thought he was great. It doesn't matter what you think. Just get the dialogue going. Fill the chatter. Can you believe he asked us to do that? I can't believe it. I learned this. I learned that. Get the chatter. And then finally, find your best boss. That person that made a significant impact in your life. And tell them so. Tell them so. Tell them they made a significant impact in your life. Thank you for all you do. Big shout out to Nashua. Awesome work that you did over the past big storm. I'm going to send you a little special note of thanks. Great work, everybody. Take care. Have a great weekend. See you soon.